And we start this hour with breaking news out of Myanmar. The country's military has announced it has seized control for 1 year, saying General Min Aung Hlaing will be in power. This comes after the arrest of leader Aung San Suu Kyi along with several other top officials. Tensions have been rising between the military and civilian government since Suu Kyi's party won overwhelmingly in November elections. So for the very latest, let's get over to our correspondent Dave Gruenbaum, who joins us live in Kuala Lumpur, but he lived in Myanmar for several years. So Dave, this is a stunning development. What more can you tell us?
Yeah, absolutely stunning development, as you said, especially since this country had been transitioning to democracy since 2011, and now they had elections in November. But this is what led to this was the military was basically had been saying that those elections they claimed fraud in those elections. Now, Aung San Suu Kyi, who was the de facto head of state, the state counselor until today, her party, the National League for Democracy, they had won 83% of the available seats in those November elections, a landslide in elections that were really seen as a referendum on her first 5 years in power. Now this happens today. Senior General Min Aung Hlaing, the commander-in-chief, now in power, the military announcing they have taken control for 1 year, declaring a state of emergency. An incredible blow, huge, this is going to send shockwaves throughout the international community, both in the East and in the West. One thing we can say is that communications in the country that were disrupted, some of those communications are starting to come back online. It seems to be a little bit able to reach more and more people inside the country now than you could just a couple of hours ago. People in Yangon, keep in mind it's about 10:30 in the morning there, so people in Yangon have been waking up to this news today, stunning news. And in the countryside, it's entirely possible that in a lot of the villages throughout the countryside where so much of the population lives, they may not have even gotten all of this news yet, but just stunning, stunning developments today in Myanmar.
So Dave, since so much is unfolding and since communication is difficult, can you give us any idea of reaction on the ground? I know Aung San Suu Kyi does enjoy wide popularity in that country. How do you think this is going to go over with the public?
Yeah, as you said, she is so popular with the masses in this country. So it's hard to believe that the majority of the population would support this move. Again, there's no word, we've seen no reports of protests or demonstrations on the streets in Myanmar, at least at this time so far. But what will we see in the hours ahead? And also, what will the military do to clamp down if there are any demonstrations? And keep in mind, the military is also, even before this, the way the military drafted constitution is written in this country, the military, the civilian government had no control over the military, and the military controls the police. So even before today's developments, the military already had complete control over the country's entire security forces. Now they're saying they're taking control of the entire government.
All right, Dave Gruenbaum live for us there in Kuala Lumpur. Thanks so much for the update there. Well, keep in mind, Aung San Suu Kyi has a long career in politics and enjoyed wide popularity in Myanmar. The 75-year-old has been hailed as a hero of democracy. For decades, she led a non-violent struggle against the country's military rule. In 1991, Suu Kyi was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize while under house arrest. She's the only daughter of national independence icon General Aung San. After her party, the National League for Democracy, won a landslide victory in 2015, she rose to power as Myanmar's state counselor, often seen as the de facto leader. But her international reputation has taken a hit in recent years for defending Myanmar's military against allegations of genocide of the Muslim Rohingya community. So let's continue this conversation. We're now joined by Professor Xu Xinhua in Beijing from the School of International Studies at Renmin University of China. Professor, good to have you with us on the show today. So help us understand the power of the military in Myanmar. It controlled the government for 50 years, but it had been promising to transfer to civilian rule.
Yeah, the military is very important for us in Myanmar politics. The three reasons are: the first, the military has penetrated into all aspects of Myanmar, retaining a strong influence both politically and economically. Secondly, after the end of military government era in Myanmar, the military still holds 25% reserved seats and several key ministerial seats, including interior ministers, defense ministers. And the third, Aung San Suu Kyi and NLD were able to obtain today's political status is a result of compromise with the military. Retaining the military's constitutional power and existing political and economic interests. So that we say that it is a very, very important power cannot be neglected in Myanmar's politics.
Well, how do you expect the military to navigate this moving forward, especially as we just heard Dave mention that Aung San Suu Kyi does enjoy wide popularity. Her party was widely reelected in elections in November. So where do you see this going from here?
Yeah, we all find that the shift in military's attitude, which will bring very high risk of Myanmar's political instability. Just as you said, although the military and many political parties led by USDP believe that there is a fraud in the 2020 election, there is not enough evidence to prove. The victory of NLD has also been widely recognized by the international community. It is inconsistent with the constitution to influence election change in such a controversial way. That is my understanding. The secondly is recently the Myanmar military has repeatedly issued remarks such as do not rule out the abolition of the constitution, which is contrary to the previous statement of respect for the constitutional laws. And lastly is, according to Chapter 11 of the Myanmar Constitution, Myanmar's state of emergency can only be declared by the president. The military unilaterally declared a state of emergency and restricted the action of the president and other senior officials. I think it is violated the 2008 Constitution. Thank you.
All right, Professor Xu Xinhua from Renmin University of China, thanks for your insight today. Well, reaction to all this is certainly pouring in from all over the world. A United Nations spokesperson says the UN Secretary General strongly condemns the detention of Myanmar's Aung San Suu Kyi and the other political leaders. The U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken called on the military to release all government officials and civil society leaders. Australia's Prime Minister says reports of the military seizing power there are disturbing. The Japanese embassy in Myanmar is urging its citizens to stay indoors but has not yet announced plans to evacuate its people. Well, we'll keep you updated on this developing story in Myanmar. Stay with us. Much more ahead on CGTN.